Okay, everyone, we'll be starting in a couple of minutes, just waiting for more people to join in. Hope everyone is doing great today. And if you can hear me, please let me know that you can hear me and everything is A-okay. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Get yourself some water. Think about what you'd like to ask during the webinar. Remember, this is not so much a course, it is a webinar, and we'll be discussing the concepts of Silva and how they do apply towards your family, your children, and how you can help along the way. All right? Move my mess here. I have all these papers and things because my daughter is in town from Spain, and we did a couple of flamenco shows for her over the weekend. So we've been busy around here having fun. There were huge successes, and they both sold out. So I'm very happy and thrilled that it was so fun and successful. But of course it is, right? We were programming all the way through. All right. Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar. So happy that you are here. And it's good to see so many of you who I have connected with in months past and years past, as a matter of fact. I have to say, I have a wonderful group of people that have been following me for such a long time. And I think we're going to start a series called Grandma Silva because I'm probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest, full on Silva person that is here, who is a Silva, by the way, not just an instructor, but a Silva, and has been around the Silva method all my life, even since before I was born. And I want to cover those ideas and topics today. So what I'd like to do is, of course, talk a little bit, and of course, you can always ask questions on the chat, and then I'll stop and go back and look at the questions from time to time and answer your questions as we go along the way. Sometimes I'll be able to look at the questions as I'm here talking to you, and then be able to answer them along the way. So we'll get started with that, and I want to welcome all of you for being so supportive and for being here today and caring about our children. Of course we do. They are our future. And we want to prepare our children in a way that they're going to be contributing to the goodness of how our world and our society evolves. And more than that, how they are evolving themselves. Because everything starts with one person. And if all these one persons throughout the world are enhancing their way of thinking, being more positive, more proactive, being more responsible, and have the right tools to move forward, to fulfill their lives or feel fulfilled with their lives, be successful, thrive, stay healthy. These are all the things that we want for our children. And some of the things I want to share with you have to do with just that, have to do with things that I was concerned about when I was working with my own children, and what I would tell, and what I do tell my own daughter, son, what have you, who have children, what to do with their own. Right now, I have an 18-year-old granddaughter, a 14-year-old granddaughter, a 3-year, 8-month-old granddaughter, and one that's going to be born in September that we're already communicating with subjectively and lovingly. So the whole process for us literally begins even before conception. And I think it's really important that we kind of choose beliefs that we think are going to be effective and that can be applied for making that kind of a difference. Before I personally even conceived my daughters, I did a meditation, and I even programmed to have healthy children and all that, which is something I will talk about, because it was really important for me to consciously put what I knew into practice. And my father always had this whole concept about the Silva method. His whole belief about the Silva method was that we deliver the Silva method to people so that it can change their lives for the better by giving them the tools of how to use their mind and human potential in a way that's going to help them to thrive and live the life of their design, to take responsibility for their own living experience and own it, to be in charge of their life and what occurs around their life. And the tools that we teach them in the Silva method do just that. He was a very religious man, and he was very spiritual, and he read the Bible all the time. And one of the things that always stood up for him was a saying that said, you give a man a fish and they eat for a day, but you teach them to fish and they eat for a lifetime. And that's how he saw the Silva method. We don't want to do things for people to make it easy for them. Of course, we do that for our children all the time, but we want to show them how to do things on their own that's going to make their lives easy, and for them to understand what it takes for them to succeed. And I can share with you my experience as a mother and grandmother, but I also think that it's important that you apply your experience with the Silva method and what you know and how it's made a difference in your life, and how to share that with your own children. Some of you have children and grandchildren. Some of you are thinking about having children, and it applies to all of you. As I mentioned before, I even conceived my children, I was doing meditations, and one of the first things I did when it comes to me being a mother was that I went into level one night, and I did this probably several nights before conceiving, and I programmed myself to awaken at the time that was more ideal for me to communicate with higher intelligence or the creative energy, God, however you refer to that energy, and ask for assistance in the process. And the assistance I was asking for was basically this. I basically said, when I woke up, I went back into my meditation. I felt my connection with higher intelligence by lowering my head and attuning myself to what we call in the Silva method the center of the galaxy concept. Now, the center of the galaxy concept, as it applies to Silva, is a concept. That's what it is. It's a belief, it's a concept, it's an idea, a way for us to make more tangible concepts that are very intangible. And of course, we don't know if we're right or wrong or this or that. But when we make something more tangible, it's a way for our body, brain, and mind to work with something that is intangible again, is spiritual in nature, subjective in nature. And so we give them some form of sensory qualities that we can relate to and have that kind of an idea to work with. And when it comes to the center of the galaxy, which is a concept my father put together, his whole approach was that we belong to a system uh, where we live, that we're a part of, called the Milky Way. And it's a huge, vast system. It's one of the galaxies of millions of billions of galaxies throughout the whole universe. But we belong and live in the Milky Way, the galaxy that we have named the Milky Way, in a solar system or a stellar system, well, solar because we have a sun, that is located in one of the outer branches of the galaxy. It's a spiral galaxy. But at the very center of our galaxy is an intense culmination of energy. It's an intense concentration of energy. And from that intense energy, it spirals out to all the rest of the galaxy. So his concept, my father's concept, was that perhaps because there's such an intense concentration of energy at the very center, maybe that's where the intelligence that manages our galaxy, not the entire universe, but our galaxy, resides. So his idea is that we align ourselves mentally with our imagination to the center of the galaxy, as if the galaxy was floating above us, and we sense this connection from our brain all the way up to the center of the galaxy. He would say where our higher intelligence resides, that's in charge of all things within the galaxy itself, including us and our challenges or whatever. So what he and I asked my father, well, how do I go about this? He said, well, connect to higher intelligence, the center of the galaxy, and ask higher intelligence for assistance, and let them know that you are going to open yourself up and be ready to bring in this new energy into this planet that we call Earth. And so you're going to have a vehicle that is going, a human being, be a human being that we hope to be productive and to make this a better place in which for us and where to live. So I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and do that. And so I did. I went to my level one night before I was thinking about conceiving my first child, and I did the same thing with my second child. And so all my children. And so I went into my level. I programmed myself to wake up when it was the best time for me to communicate with higher intelligence and request assistance for what I was going to do, which is conceive. And so I did. I went to sleep. Sometime during the night, I woke up. I reminded myself, this is my moment. This is my moment to connect with higher intelligence. So I went back into my level and I lowered my head, and I sensed, I imagined a blue white light coming out of the top of my head and moving all the way up to the galaxy I imagined above my head and slightly behind. And this blue white light from the top of my head connected to the center of the galaxy. And when I felt or sensed and imagined that connection, then I said, I'm here to offer you assistance in me having a child. I plan to conceive, and I'm just letting you know, which I'm sure they probably wouldn't know if they know everything, or whatever, that I plan to have this wonderful little human that will be here on this earth, and I'm asking you to send the right energy to make this little human being grow to be a very beneficial, productive person and contribute to the betterment of humanity. Something like that. I don't remember exactly what I said. And I thanked higher intelligence for their assistance, and I went to sleep after that. Soon after that, I did conceive. And I truly felt that I had a little angel inside me, a special being inside me. And it was really quite remarkable to nurture this baby through the 9 months of pregnancy, having this awareness or this sense that this is going to be a very important person. This is going to be a good person, an honest, decent human being who is going to be loving and caring and is going to contribute to making this a better place in which to live. And I always felt that way. And when my child was born and our children were born, that's exactly how I felt as they were being raised. So throughout the entire pregnancy, I consistently was communicating with my child in utero and sending a lot of love and healing. And I would imagine the child developing that during my meditations and holding them in my hand and making sure that everything was perfect and that the umbilical cord was, just floating away, but not endangering them in any way. And I say that only because my sister Delia, who has passed away, and she followed me in the family. She was number 9. I was number 8. She was number 9. There's 10 of us. She was born black as a baby because the umbilical cord had choked her and she had to be revived. And my parents, of course, were very heartened by that. But that did happen. And so she had some challenges throughout her life with brain damage and a lot of other challenges that we talk at another time. So for me, it was very important that my children did not have any of that occurring and that they were, safe throughout their entire pregnancy. Needless to say, I had wonderful, healthy, strong babies, and they have grown to be wonderful human beings that do truly talented in every way contribute to the betterment of society, and the way that they know best to do is sharing their talents and gifts with the world. They're kind and loving, and they're very just very conscious about the role that they play here on this planet and in their community and with other people and their peers. But it was very important that I applied the tools of subjective communication with them, of imagery, of working with them every step of the way. And when they were born, the same thing applied. I would communicate with them subjectively because they were not able to communicate other than the fact that, of course, they cried when they were hungry or dirty or whatever it was. And so you learn to the language that your child is speaking to you by observation and connection and what you sense intuitively. So intuition was a big role and played a big role, as did subjective communication and observation and all these different things that we do as parents naturally. We all do that. But when you have other tools that you have put into practice, you know that you have something different that a lot of people on this planet do not have. And that's that conscious desire to apply the tools that you have in ways that are very different, special, and creative when it comes to nurturing and caring for your loved ones. And needless to say, of course, children. I didn't know back then about teaching my children a sign language at a young age. We did that now with our grandchildren, and they were expressing themselves like, I want milk, or I'm happy, or I'm sad, or I want some water, or things like that. I'm hungry. I mean, they learned certain signs that they could communicate with us before they learned to speak. And that's all also very good. But if they don't have that, you can still tune into your child with subjective communication and with your intuition. And so that's why it's really important to continue to practice developing your intuition and to practice with subjective communication, which means communication at a distance. Not always. Sometimes you're in the close proximity with your child, obviously, but because they can't communicate verbally all the time, then you can also do that through subjective communication while they're sleeping. And so that we can also apply. So throughout their growth, especially in the first years of their lives, it's really very important that you begin to not only be the example that we teach in Silva of speaking positively, thinking positively, because your thoughts radiate outward in your aura and influence anybody who's within your aural range, which goes out about 25 feet in all directions. So if you're thinking negatively about your child in front of your child, no matter how old the child may be, or any person for that matter, but your children are special and different because they have a direct connection to you as your children, you as their parents, and with mothers even more so because you bore them, you nurtured them inside your body, and so there's a different special connection there. So the idea that we must think positively and image positive things is even of greater importance as a mother or a caregiver or a grandparent when you're in the presence of your children. And so we must think positively and speak positively and be the example of positive thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors in front of them because they're going to mimic every single thing you do. I think it's really funny. We had some construction workers at the house not that long ago. We found termites in one of our walls, and we had to tear down the wall and then bring, to pull out some of the cabinetry that's installed in the wall to take care of that challenge, which we did. But my granddaughter was here, and she must have been barely 3 years old at the time. And she was, she comes over just about every day. And she observed one of the construction workers, which happens to be a friend of ours, open the cabinet doors, get a flashlight that we have, there in the cabinet and check on all the inside of the cabinets to see how they were anchored in, onto the wall so that he could remove the entire cabinet very carefully. Well, my granddaughter was observing that. So later on during the day, when everyone had left and she was still there, she opens the cabinet door, she gets the flashlight, and of course, flashlights are to see in the dark and things of that nature. But she gets a flashlight and she did exactly every single motion. She looked inside the cabinet. I'm sure she didn't even know what she was looking for. She was just following the motions. Looked around the other side, poked her head in, looked to the back with a flashlight, and then put the flashlight back and closed it and walked away. And I thought, oh my God, she did exactly the motions that this construction person had done when he was observing how the cabinet was attached to the wall. And the reason I said that because it impressed me so much to see how she imitated or mimicked that. And I thought, what else is she mimicking of the people that she's around, her parents and grandparents and like. And when you pay attention, there's a lot of mimicking going on all the time because they want to not only learn things and their little sponges are always absorbing all that information, but they also love you so much that the people they want to be most like are the people who raised them. Not only mom and dad and grandparents, but the teachers as well. Some of you in this webinar are teachers. Some of you are caregivers and nannies, perhaps. Some of you are taking care of children as babysitters, maybe not your own, but you're still in their presence and you're working with them. So it's really important that we're very conscious and mindful as to what we think, believe, and behave, whether we say it verbally or just think it or feel it when we're in the presence of the children and our auras are blending because information is going to transfer into the aura. I also remember another time when my child was, my children were in the gifted and talented groups and in the gifted and talented classes. And one year, the school that they were going to, that was very low in funds and they weren't receiving funds from the state or the government. And they were having some challenges in that way. So they had to bring in all the children of different intellectual levels, whether they were the gifted and talented or the very bright children who learned easily and the regular children. And then there was a group they called the special learners. They took a little more effort to learn. You had to put a little bit more attention to them. The quality of the lessons weren't as high, maybe. They were more simplified for their learning abilities. But this year, they were blending all the groups together. And there was a very loving mother who was having a meeting. We were having meetings with the teachers, and I was waiting to meet with the teacher. And this very loving mother said, you can't put my child in this gifted and talented group. My child is not smart. My child cannot learn like that. My child is basically a bad learner. He's dumb. He's like, he doesn't learn like this. And all along, she was saying this in front of the child, a beautiful child, a beautiful boy who was standing right next to his mother, almost holding on to her as the mother was begging on his behalf to please not put him in the gifted and talented group because he was not qualified or smart enough to learn. And I was like, besides myself, thinking, oh my God, she does not realize, does not understand the damage she may be doing to this child along the way. And the teacher kept telling her, the teacher was very wise, kept telling her, let's go to the next room. Mrs. Quesada, can Johnny stay with you while we go speak? And I said, absolutely. And then so I kept the child with me and he was playing with my daughter. And of course, they were friends and they played because they all would play together during the playtime. And she took her aside to another room away and was talking to her about, her child and what have you. Needless to say, the child being mixed with smarter, so-called smarter children did phenomenally well. And even studies have shown that children will do well when the expectation of the caregivers, the parents, the teachers, the people who care for the children when the expectations are high of the child will deliver. And it was quite remarkable at the end that the child did so well because the teacher expected that of them and knew that he was capable of doing better than what the parents thought. Sometimes we rub on things into our children that, or our own limitations are into our children, because not because we don't love them, only because we don't know any better. But you're Silva graduates or you're Silva practitioners, you know about Silva. You know about these things I'm sharing with you right now and how important it is that you are always positive, not only in what you say, but what you think and what you believe and in your behaviors and what you desire for them and what you believe they're capable of doing and in what you expect them to do. And I'm not saying put false expectations and things of that nature, but know that these are brilliant individuals that, given the chance, are going to show you how brilliant they are and surpass your expectations in most cases. So I'm sharing these tools, and I know we can talk about a lot of these things forever, but I'm sharing these tools just to begin to share with you how to put your knowledge to practice when it comes to working with your children. Now, I have a lot of questions here, and I'm going to go to these questions. And if you have more questions about what I've been saying up to now, please ask me. So, Maria is asking how to teach children solo techniques in a way that makes them not think that they can use it as magic, like fly somewhere, grow wings, etc. Well, I think when you're working with your children, you want to talk about things that are things that are reality. You don't grow wings, you don't fly, and you're not going to do things that are impossible. You're not going to make yourself have blue hair. I mean, blonde hair and blue eyes when your eyes are brown, your hair is brown. I mean, these are things that we know there's certain limitations to certain things, obviously, but not in your ability to think, to create, not in your ability to solve problems, to thrive, to heal. And when we're looking at what are some of the things that will allow our children to heal, to thrive, to grow, we're talking about things of taking responsibility for your behaviors. We're talking about things that there's a certain difference between thinking positively and thinking negatively. And thinking positively doesn't mean that you're ignorant about what's going on in the world and that there is negativity in the world. Of course there is, and we know that. It just means that you choose to put your focus and your attention where it's going to make a difference. And focusing only on negativity is not going to improve situations. It might even make it worse. So when we know there's a problem, we look for solutions. We don't dwell on, oh, the problem, the problem, the problem. When we look forward for something to happen, we don't think, oh, it's not going to happen. It's a failure. We think it's going to happen. And it's going to be better than I even expected to happen. And I'm going to put my efforts to making it better. I'm going to make it work out because I am in charge here and I can make a difference. It's about putting your efforts where you have great control over, and that is in yourself as a human being. I can control what I think, say, and do. I can control if I'm going to climb a tree carelessly or carefully. I used to tell my children when they say, Mom, I want to climb a tree. I said, fine, but you're going to need to be very, very conscious, pay close attention that you grab the branches tightly, that your foot is placed in a position where you can pull yourself up, and you're going to find a way to come back down. Because if you're going to climb that tree, you better know how to come down safely. So look at the branches where you can grab onto, look at where your feet can land, where you can go up and down safely. Okay, mommy, I'm going to do that. I say, you're in charge here and you're responsible. If something happens to you, if you fall or you get hurt, that's because you needed to pay more attention. So it's about giving them the freedom to be responsible, to make good choices, decisions, to practice making choices and decisions, to show them how positive thinking and positive imagery is going to help them attract more positivity in their lives. Positive beliefs are going to help them open doors of opportunity. The laws universal laws of reciprocity, of give and take. All these things play a role. And these are the things that we can teach them with absolute knowledge that they are going to make a difference in their lives that maybe there's certain limitations of some kind, but only the limitations that we set upon ourselves. And so we I think we know better than to say, oh yeah, this is magic and it is magic, but there's such a thing as real magic. And this is real magic. It's a fantasy to think you're going to grow wings, but it's not a fantasy to think that you can fly a plane in that way. And that's an extension. Technology can be an extension of the fantasies that we have in our head. It's not a fantasy that you can fly somewhere with your own body, but I mean, it's a fantasy to think that, but it's not a fantasy that you can get in a airship and go from one place to another, or from the one planet potentially to another planet. So we can explain it. I think we're smart enough to explain these things to our children, but always showing them that there's greater, bigger, more, if that's what they want and choose to do. If you look and read stories of people in the past and what they've accomplished, they're miracles in the making. And we're always breaking limitations all the time. Can you imagine had we never broken that limitation of the 4-minute mile? Where would we be today? Still running miles, in 4 minutes or more? But we keep breaking those barriers, keep advancing further, and we don't know how much farther we can advance. I look at my 3-year-old child, and even since she was 2 years old, if she saw a phone, because she sees everybody working with it, she already knew how to change the pages and look at pictures and click on things and how to make it turn on. I mean, really, it's as if they're born with a different chip in their brain or something like that. So there are ways that we can express to our children the real magic and the fantasy magic that uses trickery. This is real magic. And I just want us to make that distinction very clear, because when you got the distinction in your head clear, you're going to share it with your children, and it's going to be clear for them as well. So let me know if that helps you right there. And hello from the Philippines, okay? So hi, Laura. I have a book that I wrote 40 years ago, yes, for parents, and it teaches the thumb and forehead technique. How often can a parent do this to help the child enter into deeper levels? The thumb and forehead technique is amazing. It's really, I'll tell you, you can do this often, but it depends on how you want to apply it. The way we applied the thumb and forehead was several ways. The thumb and forehead, first of all, is a way to help your child enter the deep inner stages or states for programming, for learning, for pain management, for whatever you need to do. But you need to already have worked to some degree with your child, because you want to start sharing meditation techniques with your children. The Dalai Lama would say, if every child learned how to meditate before the age of 7 or before the age of 8, for example, there'd be no wars in the world. There'd be more harmony. There'd be a more beautiful planet in which we would live, because people understand that when you meditate, there's this spirituality and this connectedness that you experience with others, with your parents, with your siblings, and with others throughout the world that you live with and share your life with. And one great way that you can do it is by inviting your children to join you when you meditate. Do they ever see you meditate? Or do you tell them, go to the other room? I need to be alone to meditate. And then they feel like, okay, well, I'm secluded from this, or I'm excluded from this. So when my children were growing up, I've always meditated, and they would join me, and I would take them with me during their nap time, for example, and I would sit with them or lay back with them in bed, and I would say, I'm going to close my eyes, take a deep breath, and if you want to join me, go ahead and join me, and we're going to picture going somewhere far, far away and make it really, really fun. And so we would do imagery together with our eyes closed and breathe deeply. And we might be hugging, and I would have one here and one here, and just hugging and being closer with one another, sharing a moment together. as I meditated, and they would mimic me or imitate me. And eventually they learned to be really good meditators. As they got older, we would do imaginary trips, and if we were going on vacation, we would imagine our vacation destination. We would project ourselves into that place, and we would imagine future pacing. We would imagine how everything was flowing very beautifully and wonderfully, and everything was great, and so you do it with them so that they learn how to meditate. When they get to be about the age of 7, more or less, ideally, and I say that only because when a child, even before birth and right after birth, when a child is very, very young, a fetus or a newborn, their predominant brain frequency is delta. That's the frequency, the slowest frequency of the brain. That's more akin to when we are unconscious and in deep, deep sleep. So that delta frequency is also can be very receptive to some degree because the child is making connections with all their environment. You need to remember that the very first sense that is being developed in a child, a physical sense, is a sense of touch. So a child's first connection to its environment, whether it was in utero or outside, mama's arms, nursing the baby or the bottle, the first connection to their existence and survival is a sense of touch. Later comes a sense of taste because they feed, they have to nurse, they have to, or take in some milk and they're feeding. So the taste is going to be important. And taste is first going to be sweet taste, and later on comes in the salty, the bitter, the sour, whatever, because that's their next line of survival would be that of tasting food, that kind of thing. But to taste, you have to touch. Next comes a sense of smell. And then after that comes a sense of sound, and then comes a sense of sight. But if you notice, every sense that comes into play is taking the child farther out into the environment, because you can see much farther than you can hear. You can hear much farther out into your environment than you can smell. You can smell what's in your environment, and you can taste what comes to your mouth, and the taste you have to touch. So the sense of touch or feeling, sensations are very much like the interface of both the spiritual world and the physical world as well. Because in the spiritual domain, when we're in our inner states, we sense, we feel, we have those intuitions that we don't know exactly what to describe, but we know how to interpret them for ourselves. And so when a child is quite young, the predominant brain frequency is going to be delta. But around the ages of 3 or 4, the frequency of the brain increases. Although all the other frequencies are there, predominance of frequency at that age is going to be more theta. Now, theta is where you go for hypnosis. And that's where you do a lot of the programming in hypnosis. Well, this is where a child is being impressed and programmed with just about everything they're going to experience, or the majority of the information that they're going to experience for their well-being, for their survival, for their thriving in this world. So these are critical years of a child in utero, right after being born, and as they move into the theta frequencies, where they are sponges and absorb everything more than any other time. This is when you want to be positive, think positively, believe positively, be the positive example through your positive behaviors, what you eat, do you exercise, your manner of speaking, your respect. I mean, all of these things, they're going to soak everything in. And beliefs and expectations are huge, huge energies that they need to grow, be very healthy in their being. So these are really important things. So by the time they get to be around 7, that's a perfect time, even before, if they can follow instructions, if they will sit still for at least 5-10 minutes, then you can teach them to meditate in a more formal manner, which is sitting down or laying down. Close your eyes, take a deep breath and relax. And don't be concerned if a child does this just to kind of check out what's going on and why you're doing that, and then close their eyes again. Encourage them to close their eyes. But we always need to remember that a child is already functioning at frequencies that we have to relearn as adults how to go into. You see, so they're naturally there. So to train them with meditation, it's going to be far easier, even when they have their eyes open. Okay, so don't be concerned that they don't close their eyes all the time. As a child gets to be a little older, past the ages of 14, let's say, the brain frequency, although it's already emitting delta, theta, and alpha and beta, from theta, it shifts with a predominance of alpha frequency from about the ages of 7 to about the ages of 41, or when they get into puberty and then they become adults. So speaking, biologically, they are adults. And they can bear children for that matter. And at that point, the frequency shifts then to beta as a predominant frequency that they operate with conscious awareness. And for the rest of their lives, it's going to be predominance of beta. So then that's when, as adults, if you didn't have the training as you were children or when you were children, we need to go through training to relearn how to slow down the brain frequency and stay in those slower frequencies of brain with conscious awareness, which are alpha and theta. And not delta so much because that's unconscious. That's deep, deep sleep. But alpha and theta, yes. Alpha is an alert, wakeful state. Theta is a passive state, a deeper passive state, but not asleep. Okay. You have a very passive brain and mind at theta. You don't question, you don't ponder, you don't generate thoughts, images, ideas, nothing. You perceive, you may have dreams. That when you question, frequency goes up to alpha to question that. So then at alpha, you can question, you're more creative. That's where creativity is. That's where human intelligence seems to reside. Whereas biological intelligence seems to reside more in the theta frequencies, which it has to do with healing and the innate aspects and potential that your body is naturally born with. So we always recommend that if a child can learn to follow instructions, and that's more going to be around 6, 7, 8 years old. And if they're very bright, then they can do that, maybe even younger. But to stay there, you want them to be there at least 5, 10 minutes with you. Then they're going to be more like 7-year-olds. That's when we accept them in the Silva method. Doing seminars, that's when we would allow children to come into our children's classes, not before that age of 7. And so you can start training your children more formally, I guess you could say, with the Silva method technology around that age. Prior to that age, you can do things like I did. Take naps, invite them to take a nap or come and join you as you meditate. They'll end up going to sleep because they're little and they're young and they take their naps and that kind of thing while you can meditate. But you can talk to them and tell them what you're picturing, what you're doing, go on faraway trips with your mind, go on top of clouds, go swimming in the ocean with a fish, go flying in the sky like a bird with your imagination. And you want to nurture their imagination because imagination is one of the qualities of genius. That's how you're able to think of ideas and come up with solutions and create things. And so you want to have a lot of role playing and pretending with your children all the time, especially at those ages when they're very young, because creativity leans on imagination, visualization, but mostly imagination, and that's a key tool for problem solving. So yes, around the ages of 7, and even beforehand, you being the example, they can learn how to do that. Once they know how to go into level, and they are at level, and they say you've trained a child to meditate, and they're in a meditative state, that's when you apply the thumb on forehead. And the thumb on forehead is simply this. When your child is in meditation, you say, I'm going to place my thumb on your forehead as I'm going to do now. And you place your thumb on their forehead. And you say to them, whenever I place my thumb on your forehead, as I'm doing now, and you place the thumb there, you might want to hold their head in the back a little bit. You're going to take a deep breath and close your eyes, and you're going to go deeper, deeper, deeper. And you lower their head a little bit for them to have that sort of sinking sensation. And you're going to go deeper and deeper into this inner state. And here we can learn, we can do pain management, we can do all kinds of wonderful things. And you remove your finger. Now you've programmed them. So, in future practices with your children, or should they be in an accident, should something happen, maybe they got cut, maybe they're bleeding, whatever, you can say, okay, here's mama, or here's dada, now look at me. And then you put their thumb on their forehead, you put your hand on the back of the head, close your eyes, take a deep breath out, go deeper, 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 deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper. And you do this, and then you care to or tend to them and that kind of stuff. So that's a thumb on forehead. When I was a little girl, I was probably maybe 7 or 8, and I was playing kickball with my older brothers and sisters and their friends. And there was this one guy, his name was Xavier, and we were in the same team. So I had kicked the ball, and when I was running to base, he was running back to home base, and they called it a foul halfway through. And when they called it foul, he turned, and I looked up, and with his teeth, he had kind of buck teeth. With his teeth, he cut me. I don't know if you can see up here, right there, with his teeth. And I was bleeding and bleeding everywhere because it's a very sensitive area that bleeds a lot. And one of my sisters saw it. She goes, ah, she freaked out and started screaming because there was blood all over me. And then when I looked down, I saw blood. I also got very, very scared. And my father came out right away, and he did the thumb on forehead. He did the thumb on forehead, and I went, into my meditation. By the time I came out, I was all cleaned up, and I had a Band-Aid on my forehead, and everything was fine. And we all laughed about what happened. And I've seen that, we don't do it too often. We didn't have to do it too often, but we were a special family in some ways. Every Sunday, we would gather together as a family, and we would meditate. We'd go to church in the mornings, have lunch and what have you, and then right after lunch, we would get into this big semicircle, and all my brothers and sisters and cousins and friends, and my father would go to each one of us, and with a thumb on forehead, we all would go into our inner state, and then we would do different things. We would do learning, or he would take some of the older ones into even deeper states for hypnosis, and he would practice positive negative hallucinations. And this is quite a fun thing to do, but we were very unique. I have to say, most families never did this, because not anybody I knew ever did this, but we did. And the thumb on forehead was a very, very cool tool to have. I hope that answers your question. Let me see. Arlette from Germany, how can I ensure my kids are fine mentally and physically? Also, can I change it if something is not going well? That's going to be, you're going to discover that by applying what you know. I can't tell you exactly how can I assure, not knowing you or your children or the situation or anything like that. But I can say that when a child knows or has learned tools that can help them to take care of their pain, get rid of pain, to manage, their cuts or maybe even bleeding, to learn better at school and make better grades, to be more creative and solve problems, to take responsibility of their life, to stay focused on the positive, have positive beliefs, and have positive behaviors. When they've learned that healthy eating is the right eating and it's satisfying, when they see you working out or jogging or exercising and they want to join you, you let them. All these things is a good insurance that they're going to thrive. So all these things are things that they're going to learn from you, because you are going to be the example. So if you ask me, how can I ensure my kids are going to be fine mentally and physically? I can assure that when you are the consistent, congruent example of all the things you want for your children to become and how you want them to be. If you're thriving, if you're healthy, if you're positive, if you're successful, if you're loving, if you listen, if you communicate, if you hug them, that's insurance. If you teach them just in ways, just in how you are, they don't have to learn to be positive when you're positive as a parent. They just soak it in. They become you, in that say a little mini you in a sense, as they develop their own identity and become who they are, but they develop an identity as a positive human being with positive beliefs and behaviors. And we say that's the lowest hanging fruit. If you think, believe, and behave positively, that's going to ensure a positive life. But you have to be the example, consistent and congruent example of that in order for them to be that way. Okay. Maria, do children need to learn anatomy first before doing caseworking? No, I would do caseworking with children, which is when you like scan the body and you detect what's wrong with the body and then do correction. I remember working with children in my children's class. That's how I learned to be an instructor first, by just working with children. I was told that in order, part of my training to work with adults was to work with children first, and I was told that it was easier, but it was not easier working with children. It was a bit more complicated because you had to explain things in a very succinct way that was very clear for a child's mind to understand. And if you can explain things for a child's mind to understand, of course an adult's going to understand that. Plus, a child has a lot more energy. Plus, the lessons had to be shorter. The meditations were more direct and a little bit shorter. There was a lot of other variables that you don't have to worry about with adults that you have to keep in mind or be conscious of with children. So anyways, they didn't need to learn anatomy. When we were working, I remember in a case, the man had heart issues. He had had a stroke. When I gave that case to a little boy, his name was Oscar. I remember so well. That was such a fun class. I was in Oklahoma, and he was working the case, and he was just always giggling and laughing and opening his eyes. I said, Oscar, close your eyes and tell me what's wrong with this person. And then all of a sudden, he got kind of serious, and he said, the ruffle came off. The ruffle came off. And I thought, what do you mean the ruffle came off? The ruffle came off of the heart. And then it dawned on me, he was picturing a Valentine. Like they sell on Valentine's Day. Sometimes they have little ruffles around them that you decorate the little paper Valentines with. In his mind, he pictured a Valentine, and the heart had a problem because the Valentine ruffle on the edge had come off. And I thought, oh my God, this person has heart issues. And I said, well, glue the ruffle back onto the Valentine and make sure it all looks perfectly fine. And he was giggling and he was gluing on the ruffle back to the Valentine. He goes, okay, all is good. And I said, wonderful. Now he's okay. Yes, he's fine now. And I thought, and that really was like an eye opener for me, because I thought like, oh my goodness, this is really interesting that it's not that you have to learn anatomy. Even as adults, you don't have to learn anatomy. You just need to have an intention to heal, a desire to heal, and something, a symbol, a representation will appear. That as long as your body, brain, and mind resonate with that representation or that symbol, you're going to resolve the issue, or you're going to sense information. You can make correction even. It's amazing what children can do. I was so amazed more than anything else when my own children first went to take the Silva method. I remember Ileana, the first time she went into a class, she was 7 years old. And I said, now you can come and sit into the class. I mean, you've learned so many things, but now you can come and literally sit into the class with the other children. So she was always there, just in the front row, paying attention. And I wasn't sure how much of the information she actually captured until she went back to repeat the next time I taught the class, which is the same summer, because I taught a lot of children's programs. And so summertime, they were always with me. There was no school that they would go to. And so they traveled everywhere I went. And so she went to the second class she attended, and I'm lecturing about meditating and how often to meditate. And she would raise her hand, and I said, yes, Ileana, Mom, remember to tell the children that to meditate 1 time a day is good. To meditate 2 times a day is better, and 3 times a day is best. I said, yes, I'm getting to that. Okay. And she stayed quiet. And then after I would continue talking about, she raised her hand again. Yes, Ileana, remember to tell the children that 5 minutes is good, but 10 minutes is better, and 15 minutes is best. And I said, yes, I'm getting to that. And it was just the funniest thing how much I was amazed how much children literally capture of what you're teaching them. And if you make it fun and interesting, of course, they're going to love it. So they are sponges. They will learn. And don't worry about anatomy for caseworking. They will get it. Okay. All right. I'm going to answer questions now because I know I talk a lot. So I always tell my 6-year-old son, remember what we know and have experience. That what we are assuming and speaking is what's being created as our reality. So let's think about what we want to claim. That's really a good way to put it. If your child can understand that whole concept, then yes, then you're teaching your children that they are responsible for their creations. And there's certain things that occur that lead to certain creations that are either positive or that are negative. And you have the choice to choose one or the other, depending on, again, how you think, believe, behave, on what you desire and what you expect to happen in your life. And so these are core lessons that any and every child is capable of learning. Okay, let me see. Prasmina says, I need to practice a centering exercise for years for entering alpha in a day. What should I do to regain my skill to enter alpha, and how long that I could see the result? Well, that's up to you. I mean, you don't practice going into the centering exercise, you're not going to get results. But if you practice the meditations, if you not only practice the centering exercises, but pay attention to the lessons that are embedded in the meditations themselves, because the centering exercise teaches you how to go within. It teaches you how to deepen, teaches you how to pay attention to your body as you relax, release tensions and pressures. So it teaches you mind-body management. It teaches you about how to deepen into deeper inner states with a 100-to-1 countdown, a 50-to-1, a 25-to-1, or a 10-to-1. It teaches you how to do mental projection by going into your favorite place of relaxation, which is a different place than where you are at that moment. There's so many embedded lessons there. It teaches you that you are always in control no matter what. And that's a very important lesson for your children to learn, that they are always in control, because you want to make sure that they know that they're in control of their mind and body. And that way, nobody can program them that in a way that you don't want them to, or they don't want to be programmed. Nobody can brainwash them. Nobody can control them if they have strong inner controls taught by you. So the more you learn to do these things, the more you understand these concepts, practice them and apply them, the better, more equipped you are to share them with your child. And we want to strengthen your child in mind because we want them to know right from wrong, good from bad. You want them to develop their intuition because you want them to know and sense whether to go this direction or that direction. With my children, I always play games with them. We were in front of 3 or 4 elevators in a big building. I would ask them, okay, quick, tell me what elevator is going to open first? And they, that one. And when they were right, I'd say, oh, that's right. That's very good. How did you know? I don't know. I just knew. Well, remember that feeling, I would always say. Or I would come home with a little surprise. I say, okay, what's the surprise? Guess what I had behind my body? And they would guess. And if it was right, I said, oh, you're correct. How did you know? And I just wanted them to make a connection of guessing accurately, of their intuitive ability at work, and develop their intuition, to follow their gut feeling and that inner voice that tells them, don't go this way. Don't be with that person. Go this way instead. So these are all lessons that you teach your children by just daily activities. So for Marisa, you need to practice more than anything else. You need to practice. Let me see here. It's great to see you too, Finance. How can I help my son? He has been stuck in his own room without motivation since 2020. He's 22 years old. Okay, and he's brilliant. That's where subjective communication comes to play. I'm going to get some water. I talk so much sometimes that I don't even swallow enough and I'm not drinking enough fluids. But that's when subjective communication plays a role. That's when you will program yourself to wake up when your son is most receptive for programming. When you do wake up, when you do wake up, remember to go back into your meditation. And when you do, attune to your son. So you attune to your son by counting from 10 to 1. And you say, I'm going to count from 10 to 1. When I reach the count of 1, I will connect with my son. And you count. When you get to 1, imagine him in front of you and now talk to him and share with him. And then and just, tell him what your concerns and ask him what's going on. What is happening? What are you going through? And see what you sense in that way. I remember a mother who was a similar situation. She had a teenage son, and he locked himself up in the room. He used to be very loving and outgoing and the whole thing. And then suddenly one day he just would lock himself in his room and lock himself in his room. And she was very worried. She thought, well, is he hanging around the wrong people? Is he doing drugs? And what's going on? And anyway, so she went into her meditation to try to sense what was going on with her son. And in her meditation, she went very, very deep. And then she had this little dreamlike memory of a time that she was heartbroken. She was a teenager with puppy love, and she had falling in love with or had a crush on this boy who paid a lot of attention to her. And it lasted, and she was so happy during the time and very excited. But like 2 weeks later, he just dumped her and went with someone else who he paid attention to instead. So he kind of broke up with her and forgot about her to start flirting with another girl, and she was heartbroken. Well, anyway, this memory, this dream is kind of like going through her head. And then she opens her eyes and goes, oh my God, maybe that's what's going on. So she goes into her son's room and knocks and goes into his room. And he's like moping. And she said, oh my God, son, for heaven's sake, snap out of it. You remind me of me when I was your age. I was dating this guy. It was like the first guy I'd fallen in love with. I had a big crush on him. And then he dumps me for somebody else. And right when she said that, he looks at her and he goes, that happened to you too, Mom? And in that moment, she realized what was going on and that she had sensed that intuitively through meditation. So I'm not saying this is going on with your son. I mean, he's an older person. Something is going on, though. And if he's not communicating with you verbally, physically, then you've got the tools now where you can go connect with him subjectively and ask him, talk to him, what's going on? And have this heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul conversation with him in your mind. And then use that information to reach them and ask them, what do I need to do to help you come out of this? Let him give you the information. When Ileana, my daughter, was 2, she was like a terrible 2. And she was like rowdy, she's rough, but she was like, like over the place, wasn't paying attention. And I'm saying, my God, well, how do I work with this child? I did 2 things. One of them was, of course, the meditations and work with that. And then later, not much later, but sometime later, I read a book called Parent Effectiveness Training, PET, Parent Effectiveness Training. And I learned a lot of information there that really, really helped. And so I encourage those of you who are younger parents or parents, anybody, to read that because it really did help. But what I did with Ileana, because she was only 2, was that I went into my level. Oh, and I was talking about this during one of my seminars that I said, my 2-year-old, she's really quite a handful. And someone said to me, one of my students said to me, well, why don't you talk to her counselors? I'm thinking, what? I thought, what an odd idea. Talk to her counselors. She says, well, you have counselors. Everybody has counselors. Maybe she has counselors too. I thought, well, what a great idea. So that night I went into my meditation, and I imagined her counselors. And what came to my mind was this big giant of a man or male counselor and a fairy godmother as a female counselor. And I said, no wonder she like does whatever she wants to do. She's got the protection of a giant and a magic worker, like a fairy godmother with a little wand doing magic for her everywhere she goes. And it was very insightful, I have to say, because then I asked him, "Can you please help me to do better with with Ileana and find a way for her to be more attentive?" Anyway, long story short, it worked. And then parent effectiveness training also worked. So I think Lady Diaz, I think maybe you need, was it, it was Reina. Maybe you need to start off with suggestive communication, find out to see what are the things that are working that can make a difference. Um, Attempt different things, look for subjective communication, talk to him, ask him for information subjectively, and then put him to practice and follow through so you can get the feedback to see if that works or this works or the other works. The other thing I would recommend if he ever comes out to drink water or eat is to energize the water that you have at home and or the food that he comes out to eat, because when you energize the water, you can energize the water that will help him to come to his senses, basically, to come back to relate you, to have a conversation, to confide in someone or to get help or whatever it is. But you do that with a glass of water technique. You energize the water so that he can then drink the water without telling him. You don't have to tell him. So that when he drinks the water's energized water is going into his system, into every single cell of his body and brain, and that hopefully he'll change his attitude, his perception or his perspective of life, whatever it might be. Same thing with food. You put your hands over the food after you cook it and energize the food, so that when you energize the food, it's going to help him to feel better about himself or come out of his shell or whatever. I don't know enough to give you more information, but there's a lot of tools that you can already apply. Okay. Okay, my Lady GS says, my son seems to believe more what he sees in social media than what I tell him. That can be scary, and it can. I totally agree. Not knowing what he's believing, what would you recommend? I think the one thing that I'm already doing, even with my own granddaughter, is for her to be the master of her own life and her own thoughts. And so I've always said to her, even as a little child, whether she understands what I'm saying or not, it's like, just because people believe what they're believing doesn't mean you have to. And if it's approval that you want, again, then it's not worth it. You don't need to be like others just to get approval, because not, whatever. So my thing, again, the part that I would do, if they're not listening to you and you're not reaching them because you're talking to them physically, then the only other thing you can do basically is talk to them subjectively and communicate with them subjectively. So I would recommend that you do similarly as to what I've already talked about in this kind of scenario. So the other thing too that you might want to look into is that sometimes we don't communicate or reach our children effectively because we're using the wrong language. And what I mean by that is, some of you are NLP practitioners, is that some people are more visual and they speak with visual description or descriptive wording. It was so bright and beautiful and it was sunny, and so like these kind of descriptive wording that add more of a visual quality tends to let you know that the person is more of a visual person. But if they speak more of words that have feeling and emotions, things that are heavy, sad, then those kinds of wordings in their language, when they speak, that seem to sound that more that of a feeling base, tells you that this person is more kinesthetic. And if a person talks with more like things that sounds, though that sounds really good, or God, everybody was laughing so much, it was so loud in there, and they use words that are very descriptive of sounds, then they're more auditory in nature. And they always focus on, well, you said this and you said that, because they're hearing the conversations and the voices versus oh, you look really disgusted with me. If they say you look a certain way, they're very visual. Well, you were screaming at me within their auditory, or you whatever it might be, or you pounded on the table when you were upset. Well, then maybe they're more kinesthetic. So what you want to do is discover that, and when you talk to your child, excuse me, use those kinds of words to reach them. Because if they're very visual and you're very kinesthetic, if they're seeing things in pictures, if the way they process information is through pictures, and you're saying to them, but you're making me feel so bad when you do these things, they can relate to that. You might say, I see what you mean, but when I look at you, and you look at me in this way, I'm concerned about you. Then they might say, oh, wow, I hadn't noticed how you looked, because you're always talking to them in a different way. I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, but I hope I am, because you need to study your child in order to reach them. If you haven't studied your child enough as to how to reach them and how to communicate with them, you need to find a way to communicate with them. In the physical world, you need to do it verbally and in your actions and again, your beliefs. In the subjective world, you're going to do it mind to mind and communicate with them subjectively, heart to heart, soul to soul. So you have to attempt those things to find out what's going to be working for you. Hola, Laura. I'm here listening to you since 2017. Done the Silva method with Boti. Okay. Oh, good. So you've been around for quite a long time. That's really good. And then, Reina, are you okay as to how I already explained how to do the subjective communication? And I don't want to keep it too long. I know we already got overtime. Okay, she said, I will do that. Okay. All right. Who else? My granddaughter is on her, it's on her choose. Okay. So ask you some more questions if you have, because I do want to wrap up. But what you have learned is basically that what you learn in the Silva method, you need to apply. It's not about being positive sometimes. It's about being positive all the times. And being positive all the time doesn't mean that you're not aware of negativity around you in the world. You are. It just means you choose to put your focus on things that are positive, that are going to get you the job done. It's going to get you to where you want to go. And you're going to solve the problems that have to do with the negativity along the way when you apply your tools. Your mirror of the mind technique, subjective education, your glass of water, all these are tools. The mental screen concept, once your child is working with you, then you can teach them the mental screen, how to use the mental screen for learning by picturing on their mental screen information and things of that nature. But if you've never done the mental screen, how can you teach it to your child? So I really encourage you to go back and listen to your information, listen to your audio tapes, go back and repeat the course and practice what you know. But you're going to nevertheless start with the lowest hanging fruit. And the lowest hanging fruit has to do with your thoughts, your beliefs, and your behaviors. Now, you need to be the example of that. You need to be meditating daily. You need to allow your children to see you meditate along the way. And then you're going to share with them, because then they're going to say, what are you doing? Oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm working on this little ache. I have this little ache right here, but I just send energy to it. And now it feels so much better. And so as you explain to them and make this kind of practice an everyday lifestyle, then they're going to grow up knowing that meditation is as natural as brushing your teeth and combing your hair. But if you make it sound like it's something like, oh, magical, different, fantastical, then it's not going to work that way. This is how we are as human beings. We have the ability to use both our physical nature and our subjective nature. We are physical in nature and we are spiritual, subjective in nature as well. We need to bring in the two worlds, both worlds in one being in your children. They need to become aware that they have a part in them that is more spiritual than is physical. And that's how they think, what they fear, what they love, what they desire, what they believe, what they expect. All these things are subjective in nature. And that's what they need to understand more than anything else. Online, there's a lot of, I ran into Dr. Siggy, Siggi, on Instagram. She has some great advice as to how to work with the children. Of course, on a physical level, behavioral things, communicating with them, reaching what's important to them, like when they misbehave and how to manage their fears, how to help them to be more responsible, all kinds of stuff. But I do really, really, really urge you to teach your child to take full responsibility for all their living experiences and teach them that they have that kind of control over themselves. Teach them that when they make choices or when they do certain things, they have outcomes. Certain behaviors or all behaviors have outcome. Certain behaviors have good outcomes, certain behaviors have negative outcomes. And you want to teach them to future pace. If I do this, this is going to happen. And then maybe this will happen. And then this will happen. Do you want that? Yes? Okay, do it. But if you don't want that, then change the behavior. Then do this instead. So you have options and you have choices and you can choose. But imagine what's going to happen if you did this one, or imagine what you're going to do, what's going to happen if you make this choice. So this kind of future pacing is not natural to children in the beginning. So you want them to practice and play with pretend when they're little, but as they get older, that pretend becomes more of a reality. Let's pretend you're going to do this. What do you think is going to happen? Oh, wow, if I do this, I might fall and get hurt. Okay, so what can we pretend that will not let you get hurt? Well, if I hold on tight and I do this, I hope, okay, so you want to do this kind of role playing with them into the future because you help the brain start learning new patterns of how to problem solve, for example. And that's really important when it comes to children. Okay, any other questions? Let me see. I'm going to apply to. Yes, you as a teacher, you definitely want to apply this kind of concepts with your students. In many colleges and many universities and many schools and many elementary schools and many preschools are practicing meditation. They do that because they know it helps a child. And you might want to go Google this and start looking at some of the curriculums that many educators are utilizing throughout the world, that literally they spend time to meditate before tests, for example. Even with my daughters, when they were little and they were going to be taking tests, before they would go to sleep at night, I would go to the bedside and I say, all right, you have a big test tomorrow. I said, can you picture yourself before the test? And they'll go, yeah. I said, imagine yourself being calm. Can you imagine yourself being calm before the test and then reading the test questions and all the information coming to you? Because you know the information you've been studying. And then eyes will go up. Yeah. Can you imagine answering all the questions and feeling happy about that and then getting your test paper with a very good grade? Yeah. Okay, well, good. Let's go to sleep and let's have a wonderful day tomorrow. But in that way, you already helped them to use their mind and their imagery to be relaxed before a test, to let the information come, to take a deep breath before they actually start the test, to answer the questions, to feel good about the good grade, to have that expectation as well built into that. So you can program your children even with their eyes open at that age, for them to role play into future pace and picture outcomes as they want to do it. Same thing if they're going to be doing a play or be on a theater performance or do a recite appointment class in front of the students. You can role play these things. With young children, you can literally go by their bedside, sit by their bed after they've gone to sleep, wait about 10, 15 minutes, and you know that they're asleep. Then go to the bedside and in a whisper to them, Ileana, this is Mama. I'm going to be talking to you about tomorrow's test, okay? Can you hear me? And talk in a very low voice, and they'll go, they'll respond to you, very slightly. Can you hear Mama? Okay, I'm going to keep talking to you. You keep your eyes closed now, okay? Because they're already in that state anyway. They're already asleep. And if they're kind of Or if you're rousing them to wake up, you say, keep your eyes closed. They'll follow instructions. And then that's when you put in their positive programming about, when you're stuck, when this part of your body and you put your hand over the bladder, and it feels full, you open your eyes, you swing your legs out of bed, you walk to the bathroom, you use the bathroom, go back to bed and go back to sleep. If they're happy to be bedwetting, this can help them stop bedwetting. You can also help them to stop biting their nails or behavioral problems by doing this kind of programming at their bedside at night after they've gone to sleep. And then once you've done your programming, you say, tell them how much you love them and continue going to sleep. We'll see you in the morning, and you leave. That's it. So you're programming your child as they're sleeping. So there's so much that you can do. But the main thing is going to be, you need to be the example. You need to practice what you want your children to be doing. If you want them to use their mind, to use imagery, to think positively, to believe positively, to have good behaviors, and that's what you have to do. And that's really the bottom line. And in there, you insert in a very casual, natural way, as a lifestyle, the lessons that you want them to learn, that basically are the things that you've learned also in the Silva method. Okay? All right. I don't want to be holding you back anymore. There's so much we could talk about. It really does take days, I could say, and many, many lessons. But I hope this webinar helped to open your mind up to creative possibilities, to implement what you know and the tools that you know and the techniques you know into your everyday living experience with your family or with your students or the children that are around you, and no matter what the age may be. All right. I hope you enjoyed this talk. I know I talk a lot. I know it's rattling off and a lot of things. I just had so much I wanted to share with you that you can always continue to ask questions along the way, and we're always here for you. And we hopefully will be doing these webinars, these free webinars, on a more frequent basis, and we'll let you know when they happen, and that we can just join along. Okay, maybe the next webinar will be more question and answer webinar, where you can send in your questions and we can answer them, and then let us know what more you want to learn about. But meanwhile, practice what you preach, practice what you've learned, be the teacher by example, and we'll be here for you. And we're always here and look forward to hanging out once again. All right. See you guys. Bye. Mwah. All of you saying thank you, thank you, thank you. Loved it. Thank you so much. I did too. Bye.